Alright, so this is my login. So this is my assignment submission for assignment 4. This is the website itself. Just going to refresh it. I'm going to rerun it here. And I'm going to go off the mapping. Now if you type in admin 1234, that's the correct credentials. It logs you in. You can increment a counter and you can log out. And if you type in the wrong things, then it will throw an error. So this is the code itself. So basically this session attribute username makes the username accessible between mappings. And so basically model and session are what are used to basically store data. Think of model and session as sort of like a table or like an array that can store data. Model is used locally, so model can only be used within each individual mapping's scope. So if I set something in the model in the login mapping, I cannot get data from the model in here. If I set a value in login, I cannot get that value in mapping if I set it in the model. But if I set a value in session data is shared between mappings. So if I set an attribute on session in this mapping, I can then retrieve that value in this mapping. And the difference between model and session, why you would ever want to store something in model, is that you cannot display things from session. So if you want to display something on your HTML in a post mapping, you must get it from the session and then add the attribute to the model. And so the model, whenever you see add attribute, that's how the HTML web page can actually display values and read values. The session is how you store things to the session to share between mappings. And so what session attributes does is it says, even if I add an attribute to the model and that attribute's name is username, then it's going to automatically store that between mappings, bypassing the restrictions that model cannot be stored. Anything in model is stored locally within each mapping. And so here is the parameters for login. So basically what happens first is the web page, when you run the web page, is it runs this HTML. Inside this HTML, it will basically, anything that you enter in these bars will be caught with these inputs. So if I add ABC, username will now equal ABC, password will equal what you enter into the box as well. And then as soon as you click submit, you see the action and the method. So submit, as soon as submit occurs when the login button is pressed. As soon as submit occurs, it triggers this. So when the login button is pressed, it sends a mapping of login to the method post. So basically it looks for a post mapping whose name is login. And so it'll find this. So as soon as I click submit, this post mapping will run and it will get all the data. So basically what get mapping does is get mappings used for getting data from HTML files. So it will get all the data that the user inputted into here, and then the post mapping will say read from the data stored here, and you use request param to do that. So I'm going to request the username stored in this box, and I'm going to request the password stored in the other box. And now I basically read from what the user inputted, and that's basically get mapping gets input, post mapping will or get mapping will get input. Post mapping can read from the input that a get mapping has acquired. And so I'm getting the username, password. I'm also getting the model and session. If the username the user inputted is admin and the password is 1234, then add an attribute to the model called username. Then add a, and so basically what this is doing is saying I am now adding now this username attribute can be shared between every mapping because of this session attributes. I'm basically saying whenever I add username to the model, also add it to the session. This is what this does. And now I'm saying session, so I'm adding an attribute of counter to the session. So now this counter attribute can be shared between all of these mappings. And then I go to redirect to dashboard. And what that does is now we're at the dashboard. So what this return does, whenever a mapping returns something, it's saying go to an HTML file, because we have time leaf. That's what time leaf does. Whenever I return something from a mapping, go to an HTML. So then when you've entered incorrectly, it brings you to the dashboard where you can click things. Otherwise, add an attribute error to the model, and then return login. So basically, what this does is now, whenever I return, like I'm pretty sure whenever you return, basically each HTML file will actually read from model and session, or each HTML file will read from the values in model. So basically, I'm saying give this attribute to login, so that whenever my mapping returns login, this HTML will actually read from model. And then this says if error exists in the model, which it does because I've added it here, then display the text within that attribute, or then display the value in that attribute. And so the name of the attribute is error, the value is invalid credentials. So I'm basically saying whenever I am displayed, whenever the HTML file is displayed, check if error exists in the model. If the error attribute exists in the model, if the error attribute does exist in the model, then display the value in error and make it red. Otherwise, I go to the dashboard, and the dashboard gets all, so this get mapping gets all the information stored in dashboard. Well, there's really nothing stored in the dashboard except for, I guess, the counter. And so if we go to the dashboard, oh yeah, I gotta run it. And then I run, and then I take away the mapping. Admin 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I'm here. So whenever I've logged in successfully, I'm now in the dashboard. Now, when you're in the dashboard, it gets from the session. So I'm saying I want the session in the model, and then so now I'm getting the username from the model. So up here you can see we stored the username in the model here. The model is able, the username attribute's able to be shared between mappings using model because of the session attributes. Normally model, again, if you added an attribute to the model here in this mapping would not be able to get whatever was stored. But because we used this, now we can get the username attribute between mappings. And so we get the username stored in the model, we get the counter stored in the session. So over here we stored the counter attribute's name and its value. If there is no username, go back. So basically, what this does is that the dashboard will like this will read from the username. So if we go back to here, if there's no username inputted and the user just tried to like cheat and go forward to dashboard without any username, I think yeah, the reason why that happened is because the values in model and session were not reset, so the values were the same. So now if I do dashboard, it's not resetting the values, so I'm gonna restart it. I'm gonna restart it. Come on, don't fail me. If I go dashboard, it's letting me. Okay, well it's letting me go in for some reason. I don't know why, but that will be a bug that has to be fixed. I'm not sure why that's happening. It's very strange. I'm going to maybe I'm going to rerun it. If I don't do anything, I go to dashboard. There we go. There we go. So whenever I try to go to dashboard, it doesn't let me. It immediately redirects me to the home page. Now the reason it was doing that before is because my values in model and session were not being reset. But now that I have no values in model or session, it says, okay, I try to get the attribute username from the model. It is obviously nil or null. It doesn't exist. So because it doesn't exist, I'm going to go back to the source page, and that's to prevent people from just being able to bypass the login page. Otherwise, if the username does exist, then add an attribute to the model of counter, and then return. And so basically, what this does, I've added the attribute of counter to the dashboard. As soon as I return dashboard, it goes, okay, let me display. So let me display the counter attribute from the model. So it says, okay, counter is, and so. And that is the whole reason why I'm adding counter to the model, is that counter exists in the session, but the HTML cannot read from the session, so you have to add it to the model. So all the dashboard HTML file will know when it's displayed is the values within counter. And so that's why I stored counter in the mod in the session before, and that's why I am adding it to the model to be displayed here. And the reason why I set it to 0 is because it says, okay, session add attribute counter. Then down here it gets that value. And then I add, so counter is 0 by default. I add that to the model, and now all dashboard knows is that counter equals 0. And so it's going to say counter, the value of the attribute of counter. And so it'll say counter 0. And so we can show that. And that's basically what happens whenever a mapping is returning the name of an HTML file, is that HTML file is going to be displayed. And when that HTML file is displayed, it directly reads from this model. And that's how your HTML file knows what values are, is from that model. And so so this is the button, the action is click. Whenever you what is this one? Yes, whenever this click me is pressed, it will it will go to the post mapping named click. What does that do? Post mapping click. So whenever I click, I'm going to go here. I'm getting the session. I don't need the model because I'm not displaying anything here. I'm only displaying things here. I get the counter, then I increment it. So now the session counter, the counter attribute within the session is now 1 because it was 0. It was 0. I clicked on it. Now it is 1. Then I redirect. Then this will read. It will get the counter attribute. Okay, now counter is 1. I add that to be displayed. I add that to the model so it can be displayed. I return to the dashboard. This dashboard is displayed, and dashboard knows from the model that that counter equals 1. Then counter 1. So it will say counter equals 1 or counter colon 1. So whenever you click it, and that's the whole flow of the website. And then there's also the logout, session and validate. Basically, all session and validate does is clears the session. It clears the session. It clears the data stored within the session. So now none of these mappings will be able to get the stored data within session. It will not be able to get the username because the username was stored in the session using this. Basically what the session attributes does again is if you store something in the model, when you have a session attribute, it automatically synchronizes it to the session. So whenever I add username to the model, it will automatically be synchronized to session. It's an easy way to have to avoid always getting it from the model and getting it from the session. So, and yeah, that's how it works. And then if I log out, boom, right back at the login page. And if I do this, I guess, let's see, redirect dashboard. Whenever I click the logout, so I mean whenever I click the logout button, it will. Where is the logout button? Where is it? Because well, this is it's not a button. It's a link. So whenever this link is pressed, it should go to here, right? And yeah, that's basically how it works. I guess my logout's broken, but that's a bug I'll have to fix or figure out why that's happening. So yeah.